Hi everyone, in this video we would like to present some of the new features of the Calibrator version 3 for 2026. So the number one change is that we are no longer specifying actual calibration values and tables in the boat config. So the boat config is when you're on the front page and you already have a boat declared, you can go edit it. Previously you were asked to specify some of the tables and values for calibration. Now we're only asking you what are the capabilities of your electronics, not the actual values that are in there. So that's one of the breaking changes. So if we go out of here, we'll now show you where we enter those values. So I'm going to select this boat, select my log file of the day, and I have a config file that describes what is in the log. And when I click next, Calibrator reads this file and then presents me with this new window asking me to review all the calibration settings for this session. So in my case, on my boat, I've got two different speedos, which I named Speedo and Speedo 2. And it turns out that I can calibrate them differently. For example, the Speedo has a speedo percentage and a boat speed versus heel as a 2D table. And the other one has a Hertz to knot and has two 1D tables to linearized boat speed versus boat speed, and has then a table for correction function of the heel. So looking at the first one, if I click on the speedo percentage value, it will look up what I had in my database, and currently it says the latest value is 101%. Now the other change in this version is that I can actually now specify that this value might have changed during the session. So one of the ways to do that is just to click plus and tell it that on that same day, but say at 1400, I actually changed that value to 101.5%, and I now have two values during the day. So that is quite a big change from the previous version where you could only specify one set of calibrations for the entire day. This also applies for tables. So if I click on here, I'm not actually seeing the table, it's just showing me at what point, what's the latest table I have in the database. So I can actually edit that and view it. This is the table that's currently in there. And I could also say, oh, but by the way, a little later, the boat actually stopped, say at 1400. And we actually changed the table a little bit, and we had a 0.1 here as well. And now I click OK, and we have two tables that are going to be, and Calibrator would take this in account during calibration. Obviously, you will need to revise the settings for the various speedos if you have them, for the one or more compasses, for the, you might have various wind sensors. Once again, wind sensors, in this case, on my boat, I do have two of them, maybe a vertical and a horizontal one. So for the main one, I'm going to look at the offset value. The default value is 0. It could also be that at a certain time, I actually did, forgot to enter it. So let's go and edit that. I can double click here and say I actually made a little correction in here. Now, if you're on the Pro version, and in the case that you specified that you use different upwash tables for different sail combos, then you will also have to tell Calibrator when did you change sails. Now to do this, to enable this feature, you're going to have to go back to the very beginning, and in my boat you click on edit, you go to the wind wands, and for each of the wands make sure you select the multiple upwash tables. Now to do this, I'm going to click on the manage sail changes and table mappings. So opening this up, it shows me the default sail changes. So by default, since it knows the log started at 1340, its Calibrator by default says, well, I haven't been specified anything, so I'm assuming there's no sails up. Below that, we've got a upwash table mapping. So one thing we can do is in here is enter sails one by one at different times, but there's also some nice shortcuts where if you have an event file from Race Replay, then you could load that up. Do that here, and it's found all these different sail changes there. Also note that if you are using the Onboard Assistant mobile app, you can actually get those from the cloud in the same way that you would in Race Replay. Now, here's all the cell changes it's found, and you can see below that it's telling me now about the mapping of cell combos to different upwash angles and upwash speed tables. So right now in my database, I've declared tables for J1A1, J2A2. So obviously if I'm under main and A1, it's going to be JA1, and here I've got the similar name. I'm going to map this here and map this here as well, and then here I'm going to have a J1A1 and a J1A1. So now I know what time which cells were up, and I also know which tables were used at those different times. Now let's say we have a new setup that we haven't declared yet. So let's say that maybe at 1346 I'm going to edit that and say that in fact here there was one reef in the main. So this appears here. Issue is we don't have a table yet declared for that. So let's close. It's going to tell me there's an issue. Are you okay to close? I'm going to go okay, because the place where we declare upwash tables is in this wind sensor part. So for example, I can click on upwash angle tables, and you can see that for J1A1 I've got an entry at the beginning. So what we want to do here is say, well, I've got a new table that we just created, and it's going to be called reef 1, and that's going to be for all other cell combos. And by default we're going to have a table in here which we can edit, and as usual we can import that from another table, copy it over and modify it. So this one is done. I also need to do that for upward speed tables. So I could give them a different name from the upwash angle, but in this case we're going to keep it simple. Also call it reef 1. And here's our default wind speed upwash table. Now that this is done, I just need to go back in here and now specify, by the way, I've got this new table, and this is the one that we want to use. So now we have fully defined which cells were up when and which upwash tables should be used at the same for those times. Once you've reviewed all the calibration settings, you can click OK and move on to starting the calibration. You will notice that there's a new button here called Load Post-Calibration. This is used for if you were already working in on this session for calibration maybe earlier today or the previous day, and while you were doing some post-calibration, there's a new feature where you can now save your work in progress, and so this is where you would go load it. So let me show you how you load it. Just click on that, and this is the file you would have saved called myboat.postcal.json. So let's open that up. It just tells you everything is okay, it's all loaded. Now we move on quickly through that, and as you can see, it has preloaded what I had ongoing, and that would have been the same for my post-calibration table and so on for all the rest. So now I'll show you where you can actually save this while you're work in progress. So let's say here I've changed something here, and I'm saying, oh, I'm testing a new both speed versus heel table, and I'll OK on this. And then from now on I can click save. Control S is the shortcut, but just save it. The first time you save it, it's going to ask you which one it is, and I'll overwrite that. So if you've done that once, while you're moving forward and trying post calibrations, don't forget to either File, Save, or Control S, and that means that at any time when you start this session again, you can reload your work in progress. Let's now look at another feature that is new in this version. If we go back to the moment you're loading the data, all the data is getting loaded properly, and the next step is to create phases. So that part has not changed. If it's a new session, you will be asked to create phases. What is new is that you can now select to show a wand. So here's the wand here. You can move it around like this. You can also make it longer or shorter. And you can use this one to delimit a portion of the track from which you want to delete phases, or you want actually to restrict your analysis on. For example, if I was only interested in part of this track, I could select it with a wand and say trim data. And also we can now use this to say find those phases in the table. So as you know, once it's created phases, you can explore those with the table, and you will see all the data for all the different phases. Now, if I just minimize that, if I say find, so there's 4 phases here. If I say find in phase table, it'll open the phase table and show me those specific phases. So that's quite practical. Another thing you can do now, let me hide this wand, is I can actually right click on a phase and delete it, find it in the phase, or just set the wand to that place as well. Now, another notable feature which only applies to the Pro version is if you are using multiple upwash tables and you have been telling Calibrator about when you change sales, you can now also tell it to be careful to not create phases anywhere where there's been a sale change. In order to do that, you have to go right back to the very beginning. And while you're editing the boat configurations, if you go to the maneuvers, you will have these options in the Pro version only to say, do not create any phases unless there's at least a mainsail and one other sail up, that as an option. And also say, maybe create a buffer zone of 30 seconds before, after a sail change, where no phase will be created. Finishing up on the new features in this version 3, we're now doing some post-calibration. We're looking at the calibration of the speedo, which has a percentage correction and maybe a boat speed versus heel correction table. Now, by default, the post-calibration table is the one that was used while sailing. So here it is, and now we can actually play with it and try to change some values. So as previously, when you click on a value of boat speed and heel, it highlights which points are going to get affected. So possibly here we would like to reduce this a little bit. Ooh, that's maybe a little bit far. Okay, so that's definitely improved the calibration. Now the new feature is that you can click on highlight changes, and it will show you everything that's been changed from this base table that you were using while sailing. So this should be quite helpful to keep track of all the changes you're making. And when you leave your mouse over, it also tells you which was the value, the original value. So let's click OK on that. Let's reset the scale on those. And final little implementations for those of you who like to make reports out of your calibration because you need to present it to your team or your navigator. We've implemented all over the tool this copy to clipboard. It's also in the right click here. So for example, if I click here on copy to clipboard, and then maybe I've got a Word document, I can now paste this here, and here it is. And for those of you who are maybe using the sale reports, then you also have a way to make that even nicer by right-clicking copy to web report as a JSON graph, and then we'll go back to the sale reports and paste it in here. Maybe we'll do that for this one as well. And then maybe we also want to get those stats. You right click, copy to web report as HTML and paste it in an HTML cell. Here it is, coming in here, make it a bit larger. And there it is, we got all, so this should make it a lot easier to create a web report out of your calibration process. Once pasted in sale report, I can obviously upload this to my web reports. Uploading now, that's done. And moving on to the sale reports. Here we go, we've got our calibration report, and then we could put some comments in. Just please note that this requires an update your Calibrator license. So if you have a subscription for the web reports, please talk to us.